Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge was arguably one of the most brutal periods in Southeast Asian history. The Khmer Rouge government seized power and ruled Cambodia from 1975 to 1979. The Khmer Rouge purged all other groups, leaving only pure Khmer people, both in terms of blood and ideology, to be loyal to the Khmer Rouge government alone. This was done through a form of governance aimed at creating a new society, using the foundation of so-called total revolutionary ideology. They relocated large numbers of people to the countryside and forced them to work in collective farming systems, 12 hours a day without rest, with insufficient food. As a result, many people faced starvation and disease. More than 25% of Cambodia's population, or an estimated 1 to 3 million people out of a population of about 8 million at the time, died in less than 4 years. It was a period of unimaginable brutality. So, without further ado, let's dive into the story that Just a Story brings to you today: the Khmer Rouge, a bitter history of Cambodia, the torture, and the Tuol Sleng prison. I must say first that this clip is not intended to bring up the issue of past cruelty to disturb anyone's feelings, but merely to expose the truth of how cruelly and savagely humans once treated their fellow humans, through events that actually happened in history, to remind how brutal torture or war was in the past. And before we go into the various methods of torturing prisoners, let's first get to know the Khmer Rouge. The Khmer Rouge were a group of people with communist ideas who revolted and seized power from the government of General Lon Nol in 1975. At first, people praised the Khmer Rouge soldiers because the Lon Nol government, or the previous government, had ruled cruelly. But no one expected that the Khmer Rouge era that followed would be one of the most savage and brutal regimes in world history. The Khmer Rouge dispersed people to the countryside to farm rice and imprisoned many groups of people on charges of being capitalists or pro-foreign. The main victims were royalty, civil servants, monks, doctors, intellectuals, artists, non-native Cambodians like Thai, Chinese, or Vietnamese descent, and people who wore glasses because they looked knowledgeable and not working class. And actually, at that time there were prisons all over the place. But the prison we're going to talk about today is called Tuol Sleng, with the English name Security Office 21 or S21. It was a place used to detain and intimidate people whom the Khmer Rouge considered a threat to the government, using all sorts of methods to extract confessions from those who were detained. And even if they told the truth, they usually ended up dead anyway. Now let's talk about the treatment of prisoners who first arrived at the prison. They were photographed and forced to disclose all their personal information in detail, including their life history from childhood to the day of their arrest. They were then stripped naked and all their personal belongings were confiscated. They were then assigned to a cell, where they were chained to the floor with iron bars, making it difficult to move or escape. Their heads were placed in the opposite direction to their cellmate, to prevent communication, and they were forbidden from speaking to each other. The cells were not cleaned properly, and the prisoners had to sleep on the bare floor without mats, mosquito nets, or blankets. They were also subject to strict rules that forbade them from doing anything, even sitting up, turning over, or relaxing, without the permission of the guards. Anyone who broke these rules was severely beaten. As a result, the prison was overcrowded and unsanitary, and the prisoners' health suffered. They were covered in wounds from being punished. The only food they received was 3 spoonfuls of plain rice per day, and they had no water to drink. They were only allowed to wash themselves once a week, for less than a minute at a time. A guard would spray them with a large hose, like a fire hose, while they sat in a room to wash, 50 or 60 at a time. The prisoners also had to memorize 10 ironclad rules. 1. Answer all questions and do not deny anything. 2. Do not lie, conceal the truth, or argue. 3. Do not act dumb, because this is considered resistance. 4. Answer questions immediately when asked, without wasting time thinking about your answer. 5. Do not express opinions that could be interpreted as resistance. 6. Do not cry out when being punished by whipping or electric shocks. 7. If there are no orders, sit quietly until you are given an order. Then carry it out immediately, without question or argument. 8. Do not try to hide or pretend to hide your feelings of resistance. 9. If you refuse to follow any of these rules, you will be electrocuted. 10. If you disobey or violate any of these rules, you will be whipped 10 times or electrocuted 5 times. These rules were all designed to torment the prisoners in every way possible. It's as if the guards made up these rules just to be persecute. If you can't imagine how brutal it was, I'll give you an example. Pregnant women and children who were useless for labor were seen as weak and a burden. Therefore, it was considered best to simply shut them down. Pregnant women and innocent children were murdered without mercy. Babies were smashed against trees and thrown into the same pits as their mothers. This was just a routine occurrence. But this was just one small part of the brutality. There were all sorts of savage methods of torture that are beyond our imagination. And now we're going to talk about the different ways in which the prisoners were tortured. Let's start with the first method, mock executions to intimidate. A French scholar who was imprisoned in Tulle Sleng recounted his personal experience. The soldiers took him to the execution yard and blindfolded him. He waited for the executioner to pull the trigger, but all he heard was the sound of an empty gun being fired, followed by the sound of laughter. The soldiers then took him back to his cell. This is proof that the Khmer Rouge not only tortured the prisoners' bodies, but also tormented their minds. Just imagine being blindfolded and taken to an execution yard, with an executioner carrying a gun walking behind you. How would you feel if you knew that the gun was pointed at the back of your head? Next, with the second method, stretching the limbs and letting centipedes bite them, in the Khmer Rouge prison, there was a special pool for torturing prisoners. The guards would tie the prisoners' hands around the edge of the pool and let them drown in the middle for a while. Then they would take the prisoners and tie their arms and legs with ropes and leave them hanging from the ceiling all day. The prisoners' hands would be tied tightly so that they could not shut down themselves. The guards would also catch poisonous centipedes to bite the prisoners' nipples, which is a particularly sensitive spot, so the prisoners who could not stand it usually said what the guards wanted to hear first, just to get out of their misery, even if they did not do it. Method 3. Removing fingernails, electric shocks, and beatings with barbed wire. A survivor named Chum May recounted his experience in the Tulle Sleng prison, where he was tortured for 12 consecutive days in an attempt to force him to confess to working for foreigners, which he did not do. The guards began by using pliers to remove his fingernails in order to extract a confession. Then they tied his hands and whipped him with a stick wrapped in barbed wire, leaving his back a bloody mess. But the torment did not end there. The guards then poured salt into his wounds, causing him even more pain. Finally, they inserted electrical wires into his ears and administered electric shocks until Chum May confessed to everything, even though he knew nothing. From that day on, he was deaf in that ear. Method 4. Shooting to kill slowly. Villagers who worked in the fields in the countryside had an uncertain fate. If the soldiers suspected that someone was not following orders, they would often execute the villagers en masse, like fish in a barrel. Villagers who were suspected of being disloyal, lazy, or weak were often arrested by the Khmer Rouge soldiers and driven into the forest to be shot. Many times, the soldiers would torture the prisoners by not shooting them in the heart or head. One witness recounted how a group of villagers were accused of not helping with the work because they had gone to the forest to find food. The witness saw how the soldiers shot the prisoners in the arms and legs, torturing them for a long time before finally killing them. Later, the Khmer Rouge realized that this method of execution was wasting bullets, so they switched to other methods for shut-down prisoners. Method 5. Forcing Muslims to eat pork. The Cham people are an ethnic minority group who have lived in Cambodia for generations. Most Khmers are Muslim. However, when the Khmer Rouge came to power, they began to implement a policy of wiping out religion. As a result, Cham Muslims were forced by Khmer Rouge soldiers to eat pork. Anyone who refused to eat pork was taken away and killed. Not only Muslims, but also Buddhist monks were forced to drink alcohol until they were drunk and forced to work in the fields. Moving on to method 6, using hose to save bullets. Evidence found in museums and archaeological excavations in Chung Ek, near Phnom Penh, shows that the Khmer Rouge used everyday tools such as sickles, pickaxes, logs, hoes, shovels, knives, or clubs to shut down people in order to save bullets. One survivor recounted that he and his family were forced to dig a large hole. Then the Khmer Rouge soldiers ordered everyone to kneel down and began to use sharpened hoes to smash each person's head in, one by one, until they all fell into the hole. Although he later regained consciousness and managed to escape from the pit, his entire family was killed. Method 7. Throwing people to crocodiles. In Siem Reap, there is a crocodile farm that used to be a popular holiday destination for families. However, when the Khmer Rouge took over, this place of leisure became a horrifying slaughterhouse. The Khmer Rouge raised crocodiles and would often throw prisoners into the pens to be eaten alive. One witness recounted seeing a woman tied up and thrown into a crocodile pit, where she was torn apart and eaten. Next, with the 8th method, beating young children to death, several witnesses have recounted and described in the same way that babies who annoyed the soldiers would be grabbed and slammed against trees or rocks until they died. Many other children were thrown into pits and buried alive, along with other people. Some also reported that children were thrown and stabbed with bayonets. Slightly older children might be beheaded if the Khmer Rouge caught them trying to escape. Method 9. Burying people alive. The Khmer Rouge had another method of shut down their victims slowly and without wasting bullets, burying them alive. The soldiers would gather their accused victims together and order them to dig a deep hole. Then they would order the victims to jump into the hole and lie down on top of each other. The soldiers would then bury the villagers alive, amidst their screams of terror. Another method that the Khmer Rouge soldiers liked to use was to dig a hole deep enough to reach the victim's neck and bury the prisoner up to their head, leaving them to die slowly in the heat. The victims would suffer for days, until they eventually died of dehydration or starvation. Finally, we come to the genocide at the killing fields of Choeung Ek, one of Cambodia's most notorious historical sites. More than 8,000 skeletal remains have been excavated here, along with countless bone fragments, leading to the belief that at least 17,000 people were killed here. During the Khmer Rouge era, trucks would bring prisoners, dozens of trucks here every day, all of them innocent people who had been falsely accused of crimes. Ordinary villagers, women, and children were all among the victims. The Khmer Rouge soldiers would trick the prisoners into thinking that they were being taken to a new home where they would have plenty of food to eat. This was done to keep the prisoners docile and prevent them from trying to escape during the journey. However, when the trucks arrived at the killing fields, the prisoners were forced to remove their clothes and kneel down in rows at the edge of a pit. The Khmer Rouge soldiers would then torture and beat them to death with a variety of weapons. Once they were dead, their bodies were thrown into the pit. Children were often shut down by being smashed against trees, in order to save bullets. Choeung Ek became a mass grave for countless innocent victims who met horrific and tragic ends. And that concludes our look at the atrocities of the Khmer Rouge, the torture of prisoners, and the Tuol Sleng prison, which horrified the world at the time. However, this grim legacy serves as a reminder to us all that the torture of fellow human beings, the waging of war, and the perpetration of genocide should never be allowed to happen again anywhere in the world. For those of you who would like to learn more about the Khmer Rouge, please leave a comment below and I will do my best to provide you with more information. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe and turn on notifications so that you don't miss any of our future content. Feel free to comment and share your thoughts. For now, I must bid you farewell. Bye-bye.